They laughed when I took the job in another state. 3 months later, their boss sat across from me, holding a contract, asking me to sign. At that dinner table, my family called me a waste of space. In this boardroom, I am the deciding factor on whether their company survives. My name is Aria Ramos. The smell hits you first. It's not just the turkey, it's the damp wool coats piled on the antique chair by the door. The faint, sweet rot of pumpkin guts still clinging to the porch, and the metallic tang of the cheap halogen lights buzzing in the dining room. This is Thanksgiving in the Cleveland suburbs. This is home. I push the front door shut. The familiar swell of the wood dragging against the frame, the heat of the house, cranked up to compensate for the November gray outside, was immediate and suffocating. "She's here," my mother, Elaine, called from the kitchen, her voice thin with a forced brightness that always set my teeth on edge. "Traffic was fine," I said, walking past the living room where my brother, Brady, and his wife, Kara, were already watching the game, their feet on the coffee table. They grunted in acknowledgement. I found my father, Martin Monroe, at the head of the long wooden dining table, already pouring himself a second glass of whiskey. Though the turkey was still an hour from being carved, the table was, as always, an exercise in mismatched obligation. My mother's wedding china sat next to cheap, promotional glasses from Rockland Industries, the regional manufacturing plant that defined my father's life and, by extension, everyone else's. "Aria, you're late," Martin said, not looking up. "I'm not," I replied, taking my designated seat, the one by the drafty window, the one that was always slightly too far from the conversation. Dinner was a symphony of familiar sounds, the scrape of silverware on porcelain, the thud of heavy serving bowls, the relentless, booming commentary from the television in the other room. My nephews, oblivious and loud, kicked each other under the table while Kara scrolled through her phone. Ignoring them, Brady, larger than life and smelling of the same soap he'd used in high school, was holding forth about the plant. "This expansion is massive. We're talking a whole new wing for regional distribution. Halford himself, the CEO, flew in just to walk the floor with us." "Oh, Marty, isn't that wonderful?" Elaine said, passing the mashed potatoes. My father beamed. He worked in middle management at Rockland, but he spoke of it as if he were a founding partner. "It's a new era." Elaine, a new era. I ate quietly. I had perfected the art of existing in this house as a ghost, a piece of furniture. I was a systems engineer, specializing in supply chain logistics. I saw the world in flowcharts, in dependencies, in bottlenecks. This family was the most inefficient system I had ever encountered, a closed loop of ego and resentment. Finally, Martin switched off the television sound. The sudden quiet felt aggressive. He stood, raising his glass of whiskey. The yellow halogen light caught the liquid, making it look like amber. "A toast," he announced. The kids went quiet. Brady and Kara looked up, expectant. My mother clasped her hands, her eyes fixed on him. "I was thinking today," Martin began, his voice taking on the practiced, self-important tone he used for these moments. "A man measures his success by his legacy, by what he builds. And I look around this table, and I see what I've built." He nodded toward Brady. "I see a son who is making a real name for himself, a leader, someone who understands what it means to be part of something important, something real." Brady raised his own glass, a smug grin spreading across his face. Kara looked at him with pure adoration. "You have children who make you proud." Martin continued, his eyes sweeping the table. Then, his gaze landed on me. It wasn't hostile. It was worse. It was indifferent. "And then you have children who just take up space." The words hung in the air, thick and oily as the gravy. Kara let out a high, sharp titter. Brady barked a laugh, a loud, sudden noise that startled his youngest. "That's a good one, Dad." The kids, sensing the shift, started to giggle, even though they didn't understand the joke. My mother's face tightened, but she said nothing. She just picked up the gravy boat and started rearranging the trivets. I didn't flinch. I didn't look down. I simply placed my fork and knife together on my plate, the metallic sound cutting through their fading laughter. I took a slow sip of water. My heart wasn't pounding. It was cold. It was precise. This was the data point I had been waiting for. I looked at my father. My voice perfectly level, perfectly calm. That's good. The quiet returned. But this time it was confused. That's good, I repeated. Because I'm moving to Texas next week. You could have heard a pin drop. The only sound was the insistent buzz of the halogen bulb overhead. Martin's smile froze, then dissolved. What did you say? I accepted a position with a logistics firm in Austin. My flight leaves next Thursday. Elaine's hand flew to her throat, her knuckles white. Aria, don't be ridiculous. You can't move to Texas. You don't know anyone. She's just dreaming. Elaine, Martin said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. He sat back down, the authority returning to his voice. She gets these ideas, Brady snorted, leaning back in his chair until it creaked. Austin. What are you going to do in Austin? It's just a bunch of startup wannabes and hipsters trying to find themselves. It's not the real world. Aria. Rockland. He slapped the table. This is the real world. I didn't argue. I didn't list my qualifications. The grueling interview process. The complexity of the proprietary software I was being hired to help build. I didn't explain that the wannabes in Austin were building systems that would make regional plants like Rockland obsolete in 5 years. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out a small plastic fob attached to a single key. I placed it on the table next to my plate. The sound was small, but final. My rental car is due back at the airport Wednesday night. I said, it was the signal, my signal, to myself. I would stay for dessert, for my mother's sake, but I was already gone. Martin stared at the keys as if they were a grenade. He suddenly seemed desperate to regain control of the narrative, to pull the focus back. We just got the proofs back, he announced, pushing his chair back and walking over to the sideboard. The new family portrait. My mother looked panicked. Oh, Marty. Not now. He ignored her. Pulling a large 9x12 envelope from a drawer, he slid the glossy print out and held it up for the table to see. It was from a family barbecue last summer. Brady and Kara were in the center, arms around each other, grinning. The kids were piled at their feet. My father stood behind them, a hand on Brady's shoulder. My mother was next to him, and then there was me. I was on the far right edge of the frame. Brady, in his enthusiasm to pose, had shifted at the last second, his shoulder blocking half of my face. I was blurred, pushed aside, an afterthought wedged into the margin. Look at that, Martin said, his voice thick with pride. A perfect family. Rockland is having it framed for the newsletter. Family values in the workplace. I just looked at the picture. It was the most honest photograph we had ever taken. Rockland Industries is expanding, Martin said again, louder this time, setting the photo against the centerpiece. He was on his feet again, pacing, energized. We're the backbone of this entire region. Halford himself said this family is close to power. We are right next to the engine. Brady. A small, genuine smile touched my lips. I couldn't help it. They were so focused on the plant, on the physical building, on the proximity to one man. They had no idea where the real power was. It wasn't in a corner office in Cleveland. It was in the data. It was in the network. Well, I said softly, picking up my water glass. Let's see if power can fly. Martin frowned, not understanding the reference. What's that supposed to mean? Before I could answer, a vibration came from my pocket. It was sharp and insistent, a silent alarm. I slipped my phone from my jeans and glanced at the screen under the table. The light was bright in the dim dining room. It was an email. Subject: Welcome to Orion Flux. From Maya Rourke, Body Aria. Confirming your start date. Your sandbox credentials are attached. The module is waiting for you. See you in Austin. I read it twice. Sandbox credentials. They weren't just hiring me. They were giving me access before I even stepped on the plane. They trusted me with the raw data. I turned the phone off and placed it face down on the table, next to the rental car keys. The noise of the room flooded back in. Martin was still talking about Rockland. Brady was laughing. My mother was anxiously trying to clear plates. I stood up. The scrape of my wooden chair on the floor was violent in its finality. Everyone stopped. Every eye was on me. I looked at my mother. "Thank you for dinner. It was delicious." I looked at my father. "Congratulations on the expansion." And then I turned and walked out of the dining room. I grabbed my coat from the pile, not bothering to put it on. "Arya," my mother called, her voice cracking. "Arya, the pie. I made your favorite. Don't be dramatic." "Arya." My father's voice boomed. "Get back here. We're not finished." Brady yelled something, but I was already at the front door. I pulled it open. The cold, damp Ohio air felt like freedom. It rushed in, cleansing the smell of stale turkey and resentment from my lungs. I stepped onto the porch and pulled the heavy door shut, hearing the lock click firmly into place behind me. I didn't wait for the apologies. I didn't wait for the demands. I didn't wait for them to try and push me back into the edge of the frame. I walked down the driveway to the anonymous rental car, the keys feeling heavy and real in my hand. I got in, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb, the house disappearing in my rearview mirror. I had a long drive ahead of me, but for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I was going. Cleveland was a damp chill that seeped into your bones. Austin was a dry heat that hit you like a physical blow. I stepped out of the rideshare at noon, and the air was thick with the smell of sun-baked asphalt and limestone dust. From a block over on 6th Street, the lazy, amplified notes of a blues guitar spilled out of a dark bar. Already active in the middle of the day, it was a city that felt alive, indifferent to my arrival, and that was exactly what I needed. My apartment was a third-floor studio in an older building that still smelled of the 1970s. The landlord had called it vintage. That meant the kitchen tile was a nauseating shade of avocado, and the air conditioner wheezed like it was on its last legs. A ceiling fan, its blades heavy with dust, clicked and rattled on its lowest setting, but the afternoon sun, a fierce, unfiltered white gold, was pouring straight through the thin blinds, cutting sharp, clean lines across the floor. In Cleveland, the sun was a rumor. Here, it was an interrogation. I dropped my single suitcase by the door. I had packed light. I had left with nothing I wasn't willing to lose, which, it turned out, was almost everything. The next morning, I walked to the Orion Flux office. There was no grand lobby, no security desk, no newsletter with a family values section. It was just a heavy glass door on a nondescript street, leading to a small, chaotic, open-plan room. The air smelled of stale coffee, ozone from the servers, and the sharp, chemical tang of whiteboard markers. The entire back wall was a whiteboard, and it was a work of art. It was covered, edge to edge, in a sprawling diagram of arrows, boxes, and frantic, scrawled equations. It was a map of the entire American logistics network, or at least, their ambition to map it. A woman with a short, severe haircut and a worn-out t-shirt for a band I didn't recognize looked up from a laptop balanced on a stack of books. She didn't smile. She just watched me approach. "Arya Ramos," I said. "Maya Rourke," she replied, her voice low and gravelly. She was my new boss. She gestured to the whiteboard, not as a welcome, but as an immediate call to action. "You're looking at the problem. Every arrow is a freight line, every box is a warehouse, and every single one of them is lying to us." She picked up a red marker. "Their systems report inventory once a day. They report bottlenecks when a manager finally gets around to filing a report. Usually 6 hours after the fact. It's archaic. We're building the Pulse module." She drew a new, sharp line from a box labeled Dallas Depot to one labeled End User. "We are not going to guess. We are going to know. Pulse is designed to ingest live data from every sensor we can tap and forecast a warehouse bottleneck down to the minute, 24 hours before it happens." My father's voice echoed in my head, bragging about an expansion. They were building a bigger, dumber box. Maya Rourke was building a nervous system. "You gave me sandbox credentials," I said. "I did. Did you look?" "I did. The architecture is clean, but the data feeds seem limited. I see carrier check-in times and final delivery scans. I don't see the raw inputs. Maya's eyebrows went up, just slightly. What raw inputs do you want? Everything, I said. I want the pallet-level sensor pings, not the summary. I want the raw GPS data from the trucks, not the checkpoint arrivals. I want the maintenance tickets on the conveyor belts and the damage reports from the loading docks. She stared at me for a long moment. I could feel the rest of the small team, maybe 6 or 7 other people, half listening. The raw data is a fire hose, Maya said. It's messy. It's gigabytes of noise. The noise is the signal, I replied. A bottleneck doesn't just appear. A conveyor belt doesn't just break. It sends out whispers first. A sensor pings 3 milliseconds late. A driver's GPS shows him slowing 10 miles per hour in the same spot every day. You're looking for the heart attack. I'm looking for the arrhythmia that happens a week before. That's where you find the truth. Maya's expression didn't change, but she turned to her laptop, typed for a moment, and hit enter. My phone buzzed. A new set of keys, full root access. Don't break the build, she said. Your desk is the empty one. I worked for 18 hours straight. I didn't stop for lunch. I didn't stop for dinner. The small office emptied out one by one, until it was just me, the hum of the servers, and the relentless glow of the monitors. The whiteboard looked like a battlefield map under the harsh fluorescent lights. Around 2 a.m, my eyes were burning. My studio apartment was a 30-minute walk away. The servers in the small, ventilated closet at the back of the office were putting out a steady, dry heat. I found a collapsible folding chair in a supply closet, the kind meant for outdoor events. I dragged it into the server room, wedged it between 2 racks, and closed my eyes. The roar of the fans was deafening, but the heat was constant. It was the complete opposite of the drafty window seat at my parents' table. I fell asleep in 5 minutes. I woke to the smell of burnt coffee and a hand shaking my shoulder. I flinched, my hand flying up, and I was momentarily confused, thinking I was in my old bedroom. A guy with a kind, tired face and a truly spectacular beard was holding 2 paper cups. Easy, he said. You're at Orion. My name's Leo. You're sleeping with the mainframes. I sat up, my neck screaming in protest. Sorry, I lost track of time. He handed me one of the cups. The coffee was thick as tar. Don't be. Maya did the same thing her first month. Anyone who survives the first week here stays for a very long time. Welcome to the island. Thanks, I said, taking a sip. It was awful, and it was perfect. I went back to my desk, the sun just starting to bleach the Austin sky. I had an email. It wasn't from Maya. It was from my mother. My heart did a stupid, familiar little leap. Subject hello. From home I opened it. There was no text, just a single, large image file. It was a picture of Brady's 2 kids, grinning maniacally, their faces smeared with chocolate cake. The file was named Grandkids, JPG. That was it. No. How was the flight? No. Did you land safely? No. What is your new apartment like? Not a single question. I was just a repository for their family updates. I stared at the picture for a full minute. I saw my father, out of frame, holding the camera. I saw my brother and his wife, just behind the kids, beaming with pride. I saw the blurred edge of the same dining room I had left. I didn't delete the email. I closed it. I opened my terminal. And I went back to work. That weekend, I explored. I found a sprawling outdoor flea market south of the river, in a dusty box full of old electronics. I found a radio. It was an old, wood-paneled Panasonic from the late 60s. Its power cord frayed. The dial was stuck. I paid $10 for it. Back in my studio, I sat on the floor with my old toolkit. I had always been the one to fix things. My father would buy new. I would repair. I stripped the power cord, cut back the frayed wire, and rewired a new plug. I carefully disassembled the tuning mechanism, cleaning out decades of dust with a small brush, and added a single drop of oil to the joint. I plugged it in. A warm orange light glowed behind the dial. I turned the knob, and after a burst of harsh static, a faint sound emerged. It was a local jazz station, the music crackling, hissing, and beautifully warm. It was a real, analog signal. It was a sound that had traveled through the air to get to me. I sat on the floor, listening to the imperfect music, and thought about the email, about the picture, about my father's toast. I tore a page from a yellow legal pad. I found a marker. I wrote 5 words on it. Don't ask to be seen. I paused, then added the rest. Build something that's impossible to ignore. I taped the note to the wall above my small second-hand desk. I went back to the flea market and bought a large, laminated map of the United States. I tacked it to the opposite wall. I took a single, red pushpin and jammed it firmly into the center of Austin. Texas. My hand hovered over the map. I traced the interstate highways north, up through Arkansas, across Missouri, past Illinois, until my finger rested on the gray smear of northeast Ohio. I took a pen and drew a faint, hesitant circle around Cleveland. It wasn't a destination, it was a target, a data point. The circle I was drawing wasn't about returning, it was about expanding. It was about my network eventually, inevitably, overlapping with theirs. The next day was Sunday. The heat had broken, just slightly. I got in my cheap, used car and drove, just to drive. I found myself on the Congress Avenue Bridge, the water of the lake, a dark, lazy green below. I pulled over, got out, and leaned on the railing. The city skyline was a jagged, rising line of glass and steel, cranes everywhere, a testament to relentless construction. It was a city that was actively erasing its past to build its future, every single day. I took a deep breath. The air was my own. The rattling fan in my cheap apartment was my own. The static from the radio I had fixed with my own hands was my own. This wasn't an escape. This was the starting line. I had the raw data. I had the keys to the server room, and I had a whiteboard to fill. I turned my back to the water and walked back to the car. I had work to do. I lived in the noise. For the first month at Orion Flux, I wasn't a person. I was an ingestion node. I drank from the data fire hose Maya had promised, and it was glorious. Unfiltered chaos. Terabytes of information streamed in every hour, GPS pings from trucks on lonely highways, temperature fluctuations from refrigerated units, RFID scans from pallets, and the relentless, monotonous logs from automated conveyor belts. It was the digital scream of American commerce, and I was looking for a whisper. Everyone else was looking for the heart attack the moment the whole system went red, the total shutdown. But systems don't just break, they fray first. They send out warnings. I isolated the maintenance logs from one of our partner depots. I wasn't looking at the errors. I was looking at the operations. I focused on a single pallet sorter, Sorter 7B. Its logs showed operational. Its job was to scan and route a pallet every 2.5 seconds, like a clock. But it wasn't a clock. Looking at the raw timestamps, I saw it. 2.5 seconds. 2.5. 2.4. 2.5. Then, a pause, a log entry after 5.8 seconds, then another after 6.2, then back to normal, 2.5, 2.5. It was an arrhythmia, a digital stutter. I pulled the damage reports for that depot. I wrote a simple script to cross-reference the timestamps. The pattern was immediate and terrifyingly clear. Every single time a pallet was reported damaged or misrouted from that depot. Sorter 7B had experienced one of those heartbeats, a stutter of 3 to 7 seconds approximately 4 hours earlier. The machine was telling us it was going to fail. No one was listening. I walked to the massive whiteboard, erased a small section of Maya's frantic diagrams, and wrote my own heading. Microstalls. I defined it, a non-critical system hesitation, 3 to 7 seconds in duration, indicative of predictive mechanical or scheduling failure. I showed Maya the correlation graph. The microstalls versus the damage reports. It was a perfect match. She stared at it, her coffee cup halfway to her mouth. A heart rate monitor, she said. Exactly, I replied. It's the pulse. The system is telling us it's sick, long before the fever spikes. Build it, she said. Build the monitor. I spent the next 72 hours coding. Fueled by Leo's terrible coffee and the heat from the server room, I wasn't just building a reporting tool. I was building a nervous system, a function that could listen to thousands of these heartbeats at once, in real time, and distinguish a real stutter from a standard deviation. Maya gave me my testing ground. Sunspoke Foods, she announced, tossing a set of keys onto my desk. They run a massive cold storage depot in San Marcos. They are our crankiest partner. Their main line freezes up twice a week. Go fix it. The Sunspoke depot was a giant, white, windowless box that hummed with the sound of industrial refrigeration. The air inside was a biting 34 degrees. The shift manager, a man named Cobb, eyed my laptop with open suspicion. "You tech people are all the same," he grumbled. "Just stay out of the way of the forklifts." "We'll plug into your sensor feed," I told him. "You won't even know we're here." I jacked our portable server into their network. The data flooded in. My new function, the core of the pulse module, lit up. It was listening. Within an hour, the alerts started firing. My screen turned red. A dozen microstalls, all at once. "We got them," Leo said, rubbing his hands together. But I checked the floor. I walked the line. Everything was moving perfectly. "No," I said, frustrated. "These are false positives." I dove back into the data. The stalls were all originating from the sensors near loading Bay 4. I pulled the environmental logs. Of course, Bay 4's main doors were wide open, letting in the 95-degree Texas heat. The sudden temperature change was thickening the grease on the belt's joints, causing a fractional hesitation. It wasn't a mechanical failure. It was an environmental variable. The system was smart, but it was stupid. It couldn't tell the difference between broken and cold. I spent all night in that freezing warehouse, my fingers stiff and numb, rewriting the function. I added a new layer, teaching Pulse to cross-reference mechanical data with environmental data. It had to learn context. It had to learn to think. We were on day 3 of the pilot. Cobb was already complaining about us wasting his time. Then, at 2:17 in the afternoon, Pulse threw a single, high-priority alert, a new icon I had designed a yellow, flashing heartbeat. "Main sorting line 3A, I read off the screen. "Predicted critical bottleneck in approximately 25 minutes. Cobb scoffed, literally laughed in my face. "That line was serviced this morning. Kid, your app is wrong." "Trust the math," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. We went to the floor. Line 3A, a massive, snaking river of steel rollers, was moving perfectly. 10 minutes passed. 20 minutes. Cobb was smiling, a smug. "I told you so." Look on his face, ready to throw us out. Then, we heard it. A high-pitched hydraulic whine, an automated floor-sweeping robot, a massive industrial unit the size of a golf cart, turned a corner. Its internal schedule was wrong. It was supposed to run at 3 in the morning, not 3 in the afternoon. It moved directly into the path of the robotic arms loading the pallets. The arm's sensors saw the robot. The line ground to a halt, a total stop. Pallets of frozen orange juice and ice cream started backing up immediately. A logjam in seconds. It took 2 managers and a maintenance guy 30 minutes to manually override the sweeper, clear the jam, and restart the line. My screen flashed. Event confirmed. Pulse had seen it. It hadn't just seen the robot. It had identified the slight, fractional slowing of the upstream feeders as the system's logic prepared for the robot's scheduled but incorrect route. It had read the shadow of the problem before the problem itself arrived. On the drive back to Austin, Maya called. "Sunspoke just sent us their internal numbers," she said. Her voice was perfectly flat, which is how I knew she was ecstatic. "That one bottleneck. The one your module caught, it costs them an estimated $80,000 every time it happens. We just saved them 18% on their projected downtime for the quarter." The win at Sunspoke was a validation. It triggered an internal email from our lead investors. Maya forwarded it to the whole team. The message was simple. Impressive data from the Sunspoke pilot. This is scalable. If this expands, the legacy factories in the Midwest are going to notice. They'll have to. Midwest. The Rust Belt. My fingers felt cold. A knot tightened in my stomach. I went into our internal sales pipeline, the database that tracked potential clients and requests for proposal companies asking for bids. I sorted the list by region, and there it was. Rockland Industries. My breath caught. It wasn't just a name, it was a physical sensation. It was the smell of damp wool coats, the taste of overcooked turkey, the sound of my father's dismissive laugh. They were listed. They were looking for a new regional transport provider for the next quarter. Their RFP mentioned unacceptable delays and inventory shrinkage. My father's voice. We're expanding. We're next to the engine. They weren't the engine. They were a box. And their box was leaking. I felt a hot, sharp spike of adrenaline. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to tell Maya, to show her. This is them. This is the company that called me a waste of space. Let's go get them. I didn't. I closed the file. I took a deep, steadying breath. This wasn't personal. This was data. My father had laughed at me. Brady had mocked me. They didn't matter. The system mattered. I would treat Rockland Industries like any other potential client. A flawed, inefficient system in desperate need of a fix. I just needed to stay calm, stay precise. Like I was tuning a parameter. That night, I made the mistake of logging onto social media for the first time in weeks. An old college friend had tagged me in a memory, and right there, at the top of my feed, was a new post from Brady. It was a photo of him, grinning, wearing a new Rockland Industries hard hat, his arm slung around a manager. The caption, "Another record week at the plant making real things that build America." Meanwhile, my little sis ran off to Austin to save the world with an app, laughing my ass off. Some people get it. Some people just play with computers. The laughter from the Thanksgiving table echoed in my ears. The casual, cruel dismissal. Waste of space. Save the world with an app. My hands were shaking. I didn't type a reply. I didn't engage. I clicked the menu. Deactivate account. I confirmed. It was done. I shut the laptop. The studio was silent, the hum of the air conditioner too quiet. I walked over to the old, wood-paneled Panasonic radio I'd repaired. I turned the knob. The warm orange light flickered on. The static cleared, and that lazy, crackling jazz sound filled the room. It was real. It was something I had fixed. It was a signal I could trust. I sat on the floor, listening to the music, and let the anger cool. I let it harden, sharpening from a blunt rage into a precision instrument. The next 2 weeks were a blur. I refined the pulse code. I added the environmental variables. I built a predictive model based on the robot sweeper incident. I stress-tested the function. We had an internal service-level agreement, an SLA. The goal was to predict a bottleneck with 99% accuracy, at least 15 minutes before it happened. I ran the final simulation using 3 months of historical data from all our partners. The results came back. Pulse was averaging an advance warning of 22 minutes. It was stable. It was real. I called Maya over to my desk. I didn't say anything. I just pointed to the final metric on the screen, SLA plus 22, MUN AVG. She stared at it. She wasn't a woman who smiled, but her eyebrows shot up, a look of almost violent approval in her eyes. She looked at me, then at the map on my wall, the one with the red pin in Austin and the faint, penciled-in circle over Ohio. 22 minutes, she whispered. She tapped the map, her finger landing right on the Rust Belt. If you're right, Arya, she said, her voice low. If this is real, that entire line of failing factories is going to need us. They're just too proud to know it yet. It came on a Tuesday, not as a formal proposal, not from a vice president, but as a stray email to our generic support inbox. It was anonymous, sent from a Proton Mail account. The subject line was simply, "Discreet Inquiry." The body of the email was 4 sentences long. "We have a significant problem at a Midwest facility. Product is leaking. Internal audits have found nothing, but the numbers are getting worse. We hear you find things people miss. Can you help? Without making noise, Leo flagged it in our 10 o'clock stand-up, projecting it onto the whiteboard. This, he announced, stinks. It's classic industrial espionage, a competitor trying to phish us. They want to see our demo, see what Pulse can do. I say we delete it. A few others nodded. It was a logical assumption. No, Maya said. She was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. It's too vague to be a good trap. A real spy would have a more specific, believable story. She looked at the word, leaking. They don't know what's wrong. They're just bleeding. That part feels real. She turned to the room. We build a demo, a high-level, no-commitment diagnostic. We don't show them the source code. We just show them what we can see from the outside. If it's a trick, we've lost an afternoon. If it's real. She let the sentence hang. My heart was a cold, hard knot in my chest. Midwest facility. The timing. So soon after the investor email. Was too perfect. I kept my face blank. I was just another engineer in the room. I can handle the data profile, I said, my voice even. I can pull public-facing data. If they're a real company, they'll have a digital footprint. I'll build the simulation model. Maya nodded. Do it, but stay on the surface. Don't use any of our proprietary partner data. Show them the what, not the how. I went back to my desk. The anonymous email had no name, but I didn't need one. I was already in the Ohio Public Records database. I didn't search for Rockland. I searched for their symptoms. Inventory shrinkage, transport delays, warehouse RFP. And there it was. Rockland Industries, my father's company, Brady's company. They had filed a public notice of contract change. 3 months prior, they had dropped their long-term regional hauler and signed a new, cheaper contract with a local outfit called Great Lakes Logistics. My fingers flew. I cross-referenced the new contractor's name with Department of Transportation incident logs. It was a flood. In the 90 days since the new contract began, Rockland's late arrival citations had spiked by over 60%. Their damaged goods on arrival claims had nearly doubled. My father was bragging about an expansion, but his new partners were dropping the ball. Late was a symptom, not a cause. I needed to see the system itself. I went deeper. The Ohio Department of Transportation maintains a public data portal. It includes anonymized data from toll booth cameras and weigh stations, all time-stamped. It's meant for academic traffic studies. I was about to use it for an autopsy. I isolated the known routes from Rockland's Huron Depot, their main Midwest hub, to their primary distributors. I filtered by truck type and carrier registration. I built a flow map. The old contractor's route was a model of efficiency, a clean, straight line down Interstate 90. The new contractor, Great Lakes Logistics, was a mess. The map lit up with a bizarre, nonsensical detour. Their trucks were leaving the Huron Depot and driving 40 miles north to a small, independent truck stop before turning around and heading south toward their actual destination. It was insane. It added at least 90 minutes and 80 miles of fuel and wear to every single trip. I dug into the contract filing again. There, buried in an addendum, was the justification: load consolidation at designated partner weigh station. It's a standard practice. In theory, you use a central point to combine half-empty trucks, but not like this. Not 40 miles in the wrong direction. This wasn't consolidation. This was a system flaw. This was the leak. I opened the Pulse module. I didn't need Rockland's internal data. I had everything I needed from the outside. I built a virtual model of the Huron Depot. I fed it the public data, the depot's known capacity, the number of loading bays, the average processing time. Then, I fed it the new contractor's chaotic route. I hit run. I watched the simulation. For the first few hours, the virtual depot ran fine. Then, the detoured trucks started to arrive. They didn't come in a steady, predictable stream. They came in chaotic, delayed batches. The system choked. The simulation's loading docks, overwhelmed by the surge, flashed red. pallets backed up. Dwell times the time a truck sat waiting to be unloaded skyrocketed. My model, based on public data alone, predicted that every afternoon between 3 and 5 p.m., the Huron Depot was experiencing a catastrophic bottleneck. The leak wasn't just physical theft. It was a black hole of time and efficiency. Product was being damaged in the frantic rush to unload. Perishables were expiring while sitting in the yard. Inventory was being lost in the chaos. This was what Pulse was built to find: the arrhythmia, the microstall on a macro scale. I took a screenshot of the simulation. It was a heat map of their depot, with a throbbing dark red circle over the loading docks, a validated wound. I didn't email the group. I opened a direct, private Slack message to Maya. I attached the image. I built the demo model. I wrote, "The anonymous email is legitimate. The leak isn't just product, it's the system, their bleeding efficiency. Their new hauler is forcing a daily bottleneck at the Huron Depot. If this simulation is right, it's a black hole, and they're pouring millions into it." Her reply was 2 words: "Send it." We replied to the anonymous Proton Mail account. We didn't ask who they were. We didn't ask for a meeting. We attached the screenshot. "This is your Huron Depot at 3 p.m. We wrote, "This is a high-level diagnostic based on public data. We believe we have identified the source of your leak. It is a systemic bottleneck, not a random loss. We can fix it." We didn't have to wait long, 2 hours. The response didn't come from the anonymous account. It came from a senior vice president at Rockland Industries. His name was Delaney. His email was short, the panic clear even through the corporate prose. "Your analysis is startlingly accurate. We have been chasing ghosts. We require a formal presentation of your solution, immediately. Should your team fly to Austin, or shall we arrange travel to you?" I read the line twice. Fly to Austin, or should we fly to you? It was the classic corporate power play. Who bows, who travels, who is the supplicant, and who is the authority? I looked at Maya. She was already typing her reply. She hit send before I had even finished processing the question. I read what she had written. "We don't fly, we build. We will provide a secure, one-time dashboard link for a remote presentation. Thursday at 10 a.m. Central. Please have all relevant stakeholders present." The line was drawn. We were not vendors. We were surgeons. They would come to our operating room. That night, I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline from the day had faded, leaving a cold, clear focus. I was in my studio. The air was still. I turned on the old Panasonic radio. The warm orange light glowed, and a low, smoky jazz track, full of static and soul, filled the room. I thought of that Thanksgiving dinner. I thought of the glossy family portrait, of my father and Brady, arms around each other, grinning in the center. I thought of my own image, blurred and half-hidden, pushed to the absolute margin of the frame. They had looked right at me and seen nothing. An irrelevant detail, a waste of space. They were blind. They were sitting inside their engine of power, and they couldn't even see the massive, gaping hole in their own system. But I could. From 1,000 miles away, with nothing but public data and a module I had built, I could see them more clearly than they had ever seen me. I opened my laptop. The Pulse module was brilliant, but it was a diagnostic. It showed them the problem. What if they just took our analysis and tried to fix it themselves? What if they handed my work, my data, to Brady? My little sis plays with computers. I wouldn't let that happen. I started coding a new layer for the demo. I named the file Obsidian. Pulse was a monitor. Obsidian would be a ledger. I wrote a function that would attach a cryptographic hash, a unique, unbreakable digital fingerprint to every single data point Pulse ingested, every pallet scan, every truck's GPS ping, every single sensor heartbeat. It would create an immutable, unchangeable, time-stamped record of every single item that moved through their supply chain. If a pallet disappeared, Obsidian would know. If a manifest was altered, Obsidian would have the original. It wasn't just a prediction tool, it was an accountability engine, a permanent, digital witness that could not be argued with. Then, I added the trap. Deep in the code for the demo module, I wrote a few lines of elegant, invisible, non-functional code. It was a digital watermark, a signature. If Rockland or any client ever tried to copy our source code, ever tried to steal Pulse and build their own version, that tiny, hidden string of code would execute. It would ping a private Orion Flux server. It wouldn't stop them. It didn't need to. It would just tell me, irrefutably, who was holding the stolen goods. I finished coding as the first, pale gray light of the Texas dawn filtered through my blinds. I had built the demo. I had built the proof. And I had built the lock. They wanted me to find their leak. I was about to give them a mirror, and it would show them every single flaw. The remote presentation was a slaughter. We hadn't just shown Rockland Industries the heat map of their bottleneck. We had shown them, with precise, chilling mathematics, the exact cost. We cross-referenced their lost shipments with the market value of those goods. We calculated the man-hours lost, the fuel wasted, the penalty fees from their own clients. We put a number on the screen. The face of Delaney, the vice president, had gone pale. The anonymous engineers with him had looked at each other. A silent, frantic communication of, "He knows." We hadn't accused. We just presented the data. The data was the accuser. They ended the call, their voices stiff and professional. "We will review this internally." I was still running on the adrenaline of that meeting when my phone buzzed on the desk. It wasn't Maya. It was the family group chat. The one I kept perpetually muted. I tapped the screen. A bright, pixelated photo flooded my vision. It was Brady. He was standing in front of a warehouse bay, grinning from ear to ear, holding a comically large pair of red scissors over a vinyl ribbon. A cheap printed banner hung behind him, Rockland Industries Huron Depot, new annex grand opening. My father's text appeared immediately below it. "Here is the future of Rockland Industries. Mr. Halford himself was here." He pointed to Brady and told me, "Martin, that is the future of this company. Real leadership, making things happen." I stared at the photo. Brady, the future of the company, grinning for a photo op in front of the very building that was acting as a $10 million a year black hole. He was celebrating the expansion of a system he didn't even remotely understand. He was the future of a company that was bleeding out, and he was proudly cutting the ribbon on the wound. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. I felt a cold, sharp laugh rising in my throat, but I stifled it. A new message pinged, a private text, not in the group. It was my mother. My heart, that stupid, traitorous muscle, gave a small, hopeful leap. It always did. I opened it. "Aria," it read. "I hope you are staying inside. The Weather Channel here says it is over 100 degrees in Austin. Is it too hot for you? Make sure you have water." I read the text 3 times. I had just navigated one of the most complex corporate intelligence presentations of my career. I had just brought a 50-year-old manufacturing giant to its knees, and my mother was asking me about the weather, not, "How is your new job? Are you finding your way? We are proud of you. Just, is it too hot?" It was the Cleveland way. It was the Monroe way. Don't engage with the actual issue. Just manage the superficial discomfort. I was a point of discomfort, my moving, my new life. My silence. They couldn't ask about it. So they asked about the heat. I typed a reply. "The heat is fine. Mom, I have air conditioning." I stared at the words. Then I deleted them. I closed the message. I didn't reply at all. This pull from home, this constant, dull gravity, it made me think of the one part of that life I missed, the one person who had never been part of that suffocating system. I opened a new tab. I booked a flight for the coming weekend, not to Cleveland, to Cincinnati. I went to see my grandmother, June Monroe, my father's mother. June lived in a small, clean apartment in a retirement community. It smelled of lavender and old books, not damp wool and stale disappointment. She was 80 years old, with a mind like a diamond cutter. She was the only one in the family who had looked at me as a child tinkering with a broken radio and not seen a waste of time. I sat in her small, bright kitchen. I didn't tell her about Rockland. I didn't tell her about Pulse. I just told her I was tired. I told her I felt like I was building something real, but that the ghosts from home were loud. They just sent a picture, I said, stirring my tea. They're celebrating Brady, and my mother. She asked me about the weather. June took a slow sip of her own tea, her eyes sharp and clear over the rim of the cup. She set it down with a firm click on the saucer. Arya, she said, her voice quiet but caring. You have to stop being angry that they are blind. Stop being surprised when they can't see you. They are looking at the wrong wall. They are looking for a reflection of themselves. You are not a mirror. She leaned forward. You don't need to fix them. You don't need to save them. You just need to build yours. She tapped her finger on the table, marking the beat. You build your foundation. You build it with steel. You build it so high and so bright that one day they will have to stop and crane their necks just to see the top of it. And you know what? By the time they do, you'll be so high up, you won't even care if they're looking. I flew back to Austin on Sunday night, her words echoing in my head, build yours. A package was leaning against my studio door. It was a simple brown cardboard box, the shipping label written in June's familiar, elegant script. It was postmarked from Cincinnati. I brought it inside, confused. I hadn't asked her for anything. I cut the tape. Inside, nestled in packing peanuts, was a dark green, metal toolbox. It was small, heavy, and covered in scratches. The latches were brass, worn smooth. My breath caught in my throat. I knew this box. It was my grandfather's. He was an electrical engineer, the man who had taught me to read a schematic before I could read a novel. This wasn't his big garage toolbox. This was his fine work box, the one he kept for circuit boards, radios, and anything that required a precise hand. He had been dead for 10 years. I lifted the lid. The hinges creaked. The smell that hit me was a physical jolt. It was the smell of my childhood, machine oil, ozone, and the sharp, piney scent of solder rosin. Inside, the tools lay in their felt-lined grooves, miniature pliers with tape-wrapped handles, tiny, color-coded screwdrivers, a heavy-based, pencil-thin soldering iron. Everything was perfectly preserved. But there was something else. Tucked into a leather loop in the lid was a single, folded index card. It was yellowed with age, stained with oil at the corners. I unfolded it carefully. It was his handwriting, a sharp, slanted, all-caps engineering script. It wasn't a letter, it was a formula. 63, 37, tin lead, 400 degrees F, clean tip, steady hand. And one line, written just below, for things that are meant to last. I sat on the floor of my empty studio, holding that small card. This was my inheritance, not the hollow promise of power at Rockland, not the approval of my father. This, the formula for a strong, clean connection, the knowledge of how to build, how to fix, how to make something durable, how to make something that lasts. The next morning, I took the card to work. I walked past Leo, who was arguing with the coffee machine. I walked past Maya, who was on the phone, her voice sharp. I walked to the back of the office, to the small, cold, loud server room. The fans roared. This was the heart. I looked at the primary server rack for the Pulse module, the one I had slept next to my first night. I took the small, yellowed, oil-stained card, and I taped it to the metal chassis, right over the blinking activity light. It was an oath. It was a schematic. It was a reminder. Build yours, for things that are meant to last. I was back at my desk for less than an hour when Maya hung up the phone and walked over. She didn't sit. She just leaned against the wall. They bit, she said. I looked up. Rockland. They're terrified. That VP, Delaney, he thinks our simulation was too accurate. He thinks we had an inside source. I told him our source was mathematics. I don't think he believed me. So they're running. They're diving, Maya said. They want a pilot, a full diagnostic, starting immediately. A jolt went through me. At Huron? At Huron, she crossed her arms. But there are conditions, serious ones. It has to be a covert pilot. I leaned back. Covert how? They don't want their own people to know. Not the floor managers, not the workers, not even their local IT. This was better than I could have imagined. They were afraid of their own system. Delaney thinks the leak isn't just the hauler, Maya continued. He thinks it might be internal sabotage, a manager helping the hauler, someone on the floor. He doesn't want to tip his hand. He's trying to set a trap. And we're the trap, I said. We're the trap, she confirmed. The deal is this. They give us a firewalled, read-only feed of their entire sensor network, all manifests, all sensor pings, all camera logs, everything. But no Orion Flux branding, no logos, no footprint. We are to be ghosts. We provide a private dashboard to Delaney and Halford, the CEO, and that's it. They were inviting the Trojan horse right inside the gates. They were handing me the keys to the entire kingdom. I'll need to enable the full Obsidian ledger, I said, my voice quiet. If we're going in as ghosts, I want to record everything, every single event, every login, every time a file is accessed, changed, or even just read, every palette that's scanned, and every one that isn't, no deletions, no revisions, just the immutable truth. Maya almost smiled. I already assumed you would. Build the ghost, Arya. Build the dashboard, but make sure that ghost sees every single thing. I nodded, a cold, clean certainty settling over me. They were giving me the raw data. The unfiltered, unbiased, digital truth of the one place my father and brother thought they ruled. They thought they were hunting a thief. They had no idea. They had just invited the auditor. I went back to my desk. I pulled up the project file. I started building the private dashboard, and then I opened a new browser tab. An airline. I searched for flights. Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. I found a one-way ticket. I looked at the calendar. The pilot was scheduled to run for 2 weeks. Starting Monday, I booked my flight. For 2 weeks from that Friday, the pilot would run. Obsidian would drink from their data feed. It would record every sin, every flaw, every microstall. It would build an unbreakable chain of evidence. And when it was full, when I had the proof, the absolute, immutable, mathematical proof, I would fly home. I didn't text the family group chat. I didn't call my mother. I didn't tell a single soul in Ohio that I was coming. This time, I wouldn't be arriving for Thanksgiving dinner. I wouldn't be the ghost at the table. I would be the auditor. And I was coming to see the books. The connection went live at exactly midnight, Eastern Time. I wasn't in Austin. I was in a rented gray sedan parked on a dark industrial side street 2 blocks from the Huron Depot. My laptop, connected through a secure, encrypted tunnel, was the only light in the car. Delaney had been true to his word. He had arranged a non-employee auditor's keycard, programmed for off-peak hours, left for me at a secure drop. He was terrified, and he was giving me the keys to the kingdom. At 2 a.m, the main shift change was long over. The parking lot was empty save for a few stray cars. I got out, my laptop in my backpack along with my grandfather's small green toolbox. I walked to the side entrance, the one marked Auditors Contractors. The cold, damp Ohio air, the air I had fled, felt heavy and familiar. I swiped the card. The lock gave a heavy, electronic thud and clicked open. I was inside. The smell was immediate. It wasn't just cold air and cardboard. It was the specific, acrid scent of machine oil, rubber from the forklift tires, and the faint, sour tang of diesel exhaust. It was the smell of Rockland. I followed the schematic Delaney had sent me, avoiding the main floor, and climbed a narrow metal staircase to the utility catwalk that ran the length of the depot. From up here, I was a ghost, invisible. The depot was a cavern of shadows, punctuated by the harsh yellow safety lights. The conveyor belts, the great steel snakes of the sorting line, were alive, moving with a relentless hydraulic hiss. I sat on the catwalk. my back against a steel girder, and opened my laptop. The covert pilot was live. The data feed, raw and unfiltered, flooded my screen. Obsidian began its work, the digital ledger recording every single packet. I wasn't looking for a total failure. I was looking for the arrhythmia. It took the first night to establish a baseline. By the second night, pulse, running silently on top of their data. Found it. A pattern. It wasn't a breakdown. It was a hesitation. A microstall. On the main sorting line, sorter 12 alpha, a high-speed junction, was pausing. I watched the logs. A pallet would pass. Then another. Then another. Then, a hesitation. The log showed a 4.5-second gap. A stall. Then the system would resume. I ran the correlation analysis. The stalls weren't random. They were rhythmic. They were precise. One microstall. Every 47 minutes. It was as regular as a clock. This wasn't a flaw. This was a schedule. I went down to the depot floor. The third shift was in full swing. The noise of the machinery a dull roar. I kept my head down, my auditor's badge visible. Just another tech checking a system. I found sorter 12 alpha. It was a complex intersection of belts and scanners. I watched it. A pallet came through. Scan, route, scan, route, scan, route, then, stall, a pallet. This one high-value electronics stopped. It sat for 4 seconds. The scanner lights flashed. Then, the system seemed to clear itself, and the pallet was routed. I looked closer. The optical scanners, a pair of them, were mounted on a steel bracket. They weren't broken. They were adjusted. One was tilted upward by just a few millimeters. The other was recessed, set back just slightly. It was a deliberate, subtle misalignment. It was just enough to fail to read a barcode on approximately 1 out of every 50 scans, just enough to force the system to pause, retry, and flag a read error before it corrected itself. This was intentional. This was sabotage. My blood ran cold. I needed the maintenance logs. I had been given read-only access to their entire system. I pulled the logs for sorter 12 alpha. My stomach dropped. There it was, a closed work order, dated 1 week ago. The task? Recalibration and optimization of 12 alpha optical sensors. The work was logged, closed, and signed off on. The digital signature, B. Monroe, Brady, my brother, the future of the company. He had personally signed his name to the creation of this bottleneck. I leaned against a support beam, my mind racing. This was not just a flaw. This was the enablement, a 47-minute cycle created by Brady. Why? What did it accomplish? I forced my hands to be steady. This was just data. I pulled the shipping manifest for the last 48 hours. I cross-referenced the exact timestamps of the microstalls with the pallet manifests and the truck schedules. The pattern snapped into focus, and it was devastating. Every time the microstall occurred, the pallet that was delayed the read error was flagged. It missed its designated truck, and every time, a truck from the new contractor, Great Lakes Logistics, was scheduled to be at the loading dock. Every 47 minutes, the scanner failed. A high-value pallet was missorted, and a Great Lakes truck was held, waiting for this single, late pallet. The truck, and its driver, would then leave the dock approximately 15 minutes behind schedule, every single time. This was the excuse. The microstall Brady created was the trigger. It manufactured the late pallet. The late pallet manufactured the late truck. The late truck provided the legitimate reason for the 40-mile consolidation detour I had found earlier. It was a perfect, closed loop of manufactured inefficiency. I had to see it. This was the third night of the pilot. I knew the schedule. The next stall was due at 2:14 in the morning. I made my way to loading bay 4 where the Great Lakes truck for that route was already parked, its engine rumbling. At 2:15, on the dot, my laptop flashed the pulse alert microstall at 12 alpha. Down on the dock, a supervisor, a man I didn't recognize, threw his hands up. "Damn it, 12 alpha missed another one. The system's flagging that pharma pallet," he yelled to the driver. "Hold that truck. We've got to reroute." A forklift driver pulled a single pallet, wrapped in black security plastic, from the reject lane. "This one's gotta be consolidated," the supervisor yelled, clipboard in hand. "Put it on the Great Lakes truck. They'll drop it at the weigh station on their way out." While the supervisor was checking his manifest, I saw it. A second forklift, its lights off, emerged from a dark annex. It was carrying another pallet. This one was unmarked. It slipped in right behind the legitimate reroute. The driver loaded both onto the Great Lakes truck. This wasn't just a delay. This was the cover for a theft. I had my phone. I propped it on a high shelf, angled down, hidden behind a stack of empty CHEP pallets. I hit time-lapse record. I aimed it at the reject lane and the Great Lakes truck. I went back to my laptop. While the camera recorded the physical act, Obsidian was recording the digital one. A new alert flashed, one I had built for just this possibility. Weight discrepancy. Alert. I opened the file. Obsidian was ingesting data from the scales built into the loading bay floor. The manifest had been updated to show the one rerouted pallet, but the truck's total weight on the scale had jumped by over 1,000 pounds. The single rerouted pallet was the digital excuse to load a second. Unmanifested. Stolen pallet. This was the leak. It was a network. Brady, at the management level, created the systemic flaw. The floor supervisor, a co-conspirator, executed the theft. The hauler, Great Lakes Logistics, provided the transportation and the cover story. They weren't just inefficient. They were a sophisticated, organized crime ring, and my brother was the architect. I needed the final piece. The physical proof. I waited until 3:30, the third shift's last break. The depot floor went quiet, the belts hissing to a stop. I went back to Sorter 12 Alpha. I unzipped my backpack and pulled out the small, green, metal toolbox. My grandfather's tools. My hands were perfectly steady. I selected a miniature Phillips head driver. I loosened the housing on the optical sensor. I lifted the metal cover. I didn't even need to take it off. I saw it instantly. On the inside of the mounting bracket, invisible to any casual inspection, was a small mark. It was made with a bright, chemical yellow technical paint pen. It was a small circle with a horizontal line through it. I knew that mark. My father had bragged about it. It was Rockland's internal symbol for a quality control override. It was the mark an authorized manager, like Brady, used to bypass a standard protocol, to tell the maintenance teams that this specific, non-standard setup was approved. It was his signature, in paint. I took my phone. I didn't wipe the mark. I didn't fix the sensor. I took a dozen high-resolution, time-stamped photographs the sensor, the misaligned bracket, and the yellow override mark. I screwed the cover back on, exactly as I had found it. I left the flaw in place. I walked out of the depot. The gray, pre-dawn Ohio light was starting to filter through the clouds. I got in my rental car. I sat in the driver's seat. My hands did not shake. For things that are meant to last, I was building an ironclad case. I compiled the evidence. File 1, the pulse module logs, showing the precise 47-minute cycle of the microstalls. File 2, the screenshot of the maintenance log for Sorter 12 Alpha, with Brady Monroe's digital signature. File 3, the complete time-stamped Obsidian ledger, showing the weight discrepancy at loading bay 4 correlating perfectly with the microstall. File 4, the time-lapse video from my phone, showing the second, unmanifested pallet being loaded onto the Great Lakes truck. File 5, the high-resolution photos of the misaligned sensor and the yellow manager override mark. I zipped the files. I encrypted the package with Maya's public key. I attached it to a new email, to Maya Rourke. Subject pilot findings. Huron Depot, body Maya. The leak isn't a flaw, it's a feature. We have a coordinated, internal-external theft ring, and it's being enabled at the management level. The attached package is the complete, irrefutable proof. This is bigger than we thought. We need a legal meeting. 7 a.m. Your time? I hit send. The encrypted package vanished into the network. I sat back, the adrenaline finally draining, leaving me exhausted and cold. It was 5:01 in the morning. My laptop dinged. It was a new email from Delaney, VP, Rockland Industries, to auditor team, our ghost address. Subject: termination of pilot program. Body: thank you for your preliminary work. We have gathered sufficient internal data and will be handling the matter from this point. Your access will be revoked at 6 a.m. We appreciate the discretion. They were shutting us out. Someone had panicked. Delaney, or someone Brady had warned, was trying to bury it. They thought they could just hit delete. They thought they could cut our data feed and the problem would disappear. I looked at the sent folder in my own email. The encrypted package was already in Austin. I looked at the clock on my laptop. 5:02. They weren't revoking my access for another 58 minutes. I smiled. I closed the laptop. They could have their broken system. I had the data. I had all of it. By the time my plane touched down in Austin, the encrypted package had been sitting in Maya's inbox for 2 hours. I didn't go to my apartment. I didn't shower. I didn't sleep. I took a rideshare straight to the office, my grandfather's green toolbox heavy on my lap. The sun was just starting to burn the humidity off the glass buildings downtown. Maya was there, and she had brought our lawyer. Ivory Hale was not a lawyer in the way you see on television. She was a corporate strategist who used the law as a scalpel. She wore a severe, immaculate black suit. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful, and she held a tablet like it was a shield. She had already, in the 2 hours since I sent the file, reviewed every piece of evidence. We sat in Maya's glass-walled office, the main whiteboard behind us still covered in the original, frantic equations for pulse. First, Ivory said, her voice quiet and astonishingly clear. Congratulations, Ms. Ramos. You have not just identified a theft. You have documented a conspiracy. The digital signature on the work order is the link. The weight discrepancy from your Obsidian ledger is the proof. The time-lapse video is the definitive, operational corroboration. So we go to the police, Leo said. Maya had brought him in. He had seen the report, and he was pale. Absolutely not, Ivory countered, without looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on me. The police are messy. Criminal charges create discovery, headlines, and give Rockland a chance to play the victim, to claim rogue employees. We are not a law enforcement agency. We are a solutions provider. What's the solution? Maya asked, her voice low. To organized crime. Leverage, Ivory said. She turned her tablet toward us. We are going to draft a notice of findings. We will not use the word theft. We will not use the word conspiracy. We will not, under any circumstances, use the name Brady Monroe. We will not accuse. We will present the data as a critical, unmitigated risk. She pulled up my photograph of the yellow override mark on the sensor. This, she said, is a systemic vulnerability created by non-standard managerial overrides. We will present the Obsidian weight discrepancy as a critical failure in inventory to manifest reconciliation. We will present the video as evidence of non-compliant loading dock procedures facilitating significant, unrecorded inventory shrinkage. She was translating my data, my anger, into a language a CEO could not ignore. She was giving them a way to save face, while simultaneously holding a knife to their throat. The notice will contain 2 proposed remediation paths, Ivory continued, her voice as flat as a terminal screen. Path A, she swiped on her tablet, is the offer. Rockland Industries immediately terminates their contract with Great Lakes Logistics, citing the attached data. They sign a mandatory 3-year exclusive contract with Orion Flux to deploy the Pulse and Obsidian modules across their entire North American network. We fix the system. We become their digital immune system, and this package, she tapped my encrypted file, remains permanently sealed. And Path B? I asked. My throat was dry. Ivory's eyes met mine. They were as cold as the server room. Path B is the consequence, should they refuse remediation or attempt to terminate our access. We, as a third-party auditor, have a fiduciary and ethical duty. We will be compelled to share our findings on their systemic vulnerabilities, including all supporting data. with the Ohio State Commission on Competitive Commerce and Commodity Fraud. She had found the perfect pressure point, not the local cops, the state commission that could shut down their entire Midwest operation with an injunction while they investigated. "It's a declaration of war," Maya said. Her voice was full of respect. "No," Ivory corrected. "It's an invoice. We sent the notice of findings, encrypted and marked CEO Eyes Only, at 9 a.m. Central Time. It was addressed to CEO Halford and Vice President Delaney, and then we waited. The silence that followed was a physical wait. The office hummed. Leo paced. Maya drank a gallon of coffee. I sat at my desk, cleaning the tools in my grandfather's box, one by one, with an oiled rag. 24 hours passed. Nothing. 36 hours. Nothing. Rockland Industries had gone dark. On the second day, at 4:30 in the afternoon, my personal cell phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, a Cleveland area code. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. "This is Aria." "You think you're smart, don't you?" The voice was thick with a rage I knew as well as my own heartbeat. "Brady, you left," he spat, his voice breaking with panic. "You ran away. You had no right to come back, no right to stick your nose in our business." "I didn't," I said, my voice perfectly calm. The air in my studio apartment felt suddenly cold. "You brought your business to me. You put out an RFP. Remember you had a leak. That was for truckers. Not for you to spy on us. Not for you to run to Halford. You've ruined everything. Delaney is locked in an office with lawyers. Halford is on a warpath. You've ruined us. The system was already ruined. Brady, you just signed your name to it." There was a sharp, strangled intake of breath. He was stunned, I knew. "You don't know what you're talking about. You're just a kid playing on a computer. You're playing with fire. Aria, you're going to burn this entire family down." I leaned back in my chair. I looked at the wall, at my map, at the red pins stuck firmly in Austin. "I'm not playing with anything, Brady. I've already placed the fire extinguishers everywhere. This is just the alarm. You should probably answer it." I hung up. I didn't wait for him to reply. I didn't wait for the threats or the pleading. I blocked the number. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the vibration of the engine I had built, the engine they'd ignored, finally engaging at full power. An hour later, Maya's icon lit up on my screen, a one-line message. "Check your calendar." I opened it. A new event had populated. Sent from the executive assistant to CEO Halford of Rockland Industries. Subject urgent strategic review. Location Orion Flux headquarters. 214 West 4th Street, Austin, TX. Date Monday, 9 a.m. Attendees, CEO Halford, CRO. Delaney, Maya Rourke, Aria Ramos. They were flying to me. The boss was flying to me. The weekend was the longest of my life. I didn't work. I didn't sleep. I just prepared. I walked the presentation. Data point by data point. I rehearsed the cold, legal language Ivory had given me. Sunday night. I went to the office. It was dark. The only light coming from the server room and the glow of the Austin skyline. Our main conference room was small, all glass and steel, overlooking the city. Maya found me there, standing at the head of the table. "They're terrified," she said. "They're coming here to see one of 2 things if we'll bleed them, or if we'll save them." "I'm just going to show them the data," I said. "Good. This is your room, Aria. You built the system. You found the flaw. You lead the presentation. This is your story." She left me alone. I walked to the head of the table, where my laptop would plug in. I took a small, yellowed, oil-stained index card from my wallet, my grandfather's formula. For things that are meant to last. I used a small piece of tape and affixed it to the bottom bezel of the large presentation monitor, right in the center, where I would be able to see it. But they would not. I went into my phone's settings. I found the audio file I had recorded months ago, the one I'd made in my studio, the sound of my old repaired Panasonic radio, the warm, comforting hiss of static and a faint saxophone. I set it as my new ringtone, a reminder of home, the home I had built, not the one I had fled. I opened my laptop and pulled up the title slide. It was stark white. It just had the Orion Flux logo and the Rockland logo, separated by a thin black line. I took a yellow sticky note from the desk caddy. I wrote 2 lines on it with a black marker. I stuck it to my laptop screen, right next to the trackpad. They don't laugh in a room full of evidence. They don't call you a waste of space when you're the one holding the keys. 8:57 in the morning. The chime from the elevator arriving at our floor was the only sound in the office. We had booked the main conference room, the glass walls, overlooking the bright, frantic energy of downtown Austin. Felt like an observation deck. We were high above the noise. Maya, Ivory Hale, and I were seated. We had been silent for 10 minutes. The glass doors opened. The man who entered was not the man from my father's stories. This was not the benevolent, backslapping Mr. Halford, who championed family values in the company newsletter. The man who entered was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark, severe suit, and moved with the absolute, frictionless gravity of old power and older money. He looked carved from the same gray Ohio limestone as the Rockland headquarters. Behind him, like a shadow, was Delaney. The vice president looked like he hadn't slept in the 48 hours since Brady's phone call. His face was pale, his suit rumpled. He was a man who had been summoned, not invited, a third man, a lawyer with a briefcase, stayed by the door, a silent witness. Halford's eyes swept the room, the small startup office, the chaotic whiteboard visible down the hall, the city skyline. He was taking our measure. His gaze landed on Maya Rourke, who stood. "Mr. Halford," Maya said, her voice even. "I'm Maya Rourke." "Ms. Rourke." He shook her hand, a firm, decisive motion. He registered Ivory, our lawyer, with a curt nod. Then his eyes moved to me. It was the look I had lived with my entire life, the cursory, dismissive glance reserved for the assistant, the intern, the person responsible for fetching the coffee. He scanned me and was already turning away when his gaze snagged on the visitor's badge Maya had insisted I wear. It was simple, my name, and my title, Aria Ramos, Lead Systems Architect. Halford's head stopped. His eyes moved back to me. This time, the look was not dismissive. It was sharp. It was calculating. He was reevaluating the entire room. He was the CEO who had flown to Austin. He had been expecting a gray-haired consultant, a senior partner. He was looking at a woman in her late 20s, with her hands resting calmly on a laptop. He was looking at the ghost who had been living in his machines. He didn't speak to me. He just nodded. A sharp, impatient gesture. "Let's begin." We sat. The table was cold steel. "Aria," Maya said. I opened the laptop. The large monitor on the wall lit up. I didn't start with a welcome. I didn't start with an agenda. I started with the truth. The first slide was the heat map of the Huron Depot. The pulsing. Red. Catastrophic bottleneck at the loading docks. "This is your primary logistics hub," I said. My voice was low, clear, and amplified by the room's microphones. It felt unnaturally loud in the silence. "This is the leak you asked us to find." I clicked. "This is Pulse. This is our live, diagnostic monitor of your system. We are watching the arrhythmia." I brought up the visualization of the depot, a living map, green lines for the flow of goods, red lines for the bottlenecks, and the yellow, flashing heartbeat icon I had designed. "Sorter 12 Alpha," I said, my cursor highlighting the junction. "This is the source of your arrhythmia. We detected a rhythmic, scheduled microstall. A hesitation of 4 to 7 seconds, occurring every 47 minutes. Delaney stared at his hands. Halford watched the screen, his face a mask of stone. He was listening to the heartbeat of his own dying company. "Pulse shows us what is happening," I continued. "It's a diagnostic, but to find the why, we needed a ledger, so we enabled Obsidian." I switched screens. The bright, colorful map disappeared. The monitor went black, filled with scrolling lines of cryptographic hash. an unbreakable, immutable chain of data. Obsidian is a permanent, digital witness, I said. It logs every scan, every weight check, every manual override, every single packet of data that moves through your system. It cannot be altered. It cannot be deleted. It is the absolute truth. Halford leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. This was the part Delaney hadn't told him. This was the part he had tried to bury when he terminated the pilot. Let's follow one event, I said. I typed a command. The screen isolated a single timestamp. 2:14 in the morning. Pulse detects the microstall at sorter 12 alpha. A high-value pharmaceutical pallet is flagged as a read error. I brought up a new window. Now, here's the Obsidian ledger for loading bay 4 at 2:17. The read error pallet is logged onto a Great Lakes logistics truck. One pallet, but the weight scale in the floor, which Obsidian also monitors, records a discrepancy. The truck's weight increased by over 1,000 pounds. I let the numbers hang in the air. One pallet was logged, 2 pallets were loaded. I clicked to the next file. The time-lapse video I had taken from the catwalk. The dark, grainy footage played on the massive screen. The legitimate pallet. And then, the second, unmarked, ghost pallet, slipped on by the second forklift. This, I said, is your leak. Delaney made a small, strangled sound. Halford shot him a look that could have set paper on fire. But this isn't a simple theft, I said, my voice dropping. It is a coordinated failure. The theft is only possible because of the microstall, and the microstall, I said, my hand steady on the mouse, was not an accident. I brought up the next file. The maintenance log. It filled the screen. Work order. Recalibration and optimization of 12 alpha optical sensors. Status closed. Signed, B. Monroe. The room was so quiet, I could hear the air conditioning click on in the hallway. The name just hung there. B. Monroe. The future of the company. My brother. I didn't pause. I didn't let them process the name. I zoomed in on the digital signature, making it impossibly large, then clicked to the next slide. My high-resolution photograph of the inside of the sensor, the small, bright yellow circle with a line through it. This is a Rockland Internal Quality Control Override mark, I said. I spoke directly to Halford. This flaw was not just authorized. It was implemented and signed off on by a manager. The system was deliberately adjusted to fail. I looked from Halford to Delaney and back. I did not use the word Brady. I did not use the word sabotage. I did not use the word stolen. This managerial override, I said, using Ivory's precise, cold language, created a systemic, predictable vulnerability. This vulnerability created the incentive mechanism for your third-party hauler to exploit the consolidation clause. It allowed them to manufacture delays, overbill for wait times, and, as the Obsidian data confirms, create a reliable window for inventory reconciliation. I had given him the narrative. It wasn't his son stealing from him. It was a vendor exploiting a manager's poor judgment. It was a way to save face while acknowledging the crime. I clicked to my final slide. It was stark white, with 2 columns, Path A, Path B. You have 2 paths, I said. Path A remediation. Orion Flux deploys the Pulse and Obsidian modules across your entire North American network. We become your accountability. We fix the system, and this entire data package, I gestured to the screen, remains sealed, the exclusive property of our joint venture. Path B reporting, you refuse, and we, as ethical auditors, are compelled to release our findings, the data, the ledger, and the video to the Ohio State Commission on Commodity Fraud. The ultimatum was on the table. The room was a vacuum. Delaney, his voice hoarse and cracking, spoke first. The ledger, the Obsidian layer. Who wrote that? I turned my head and met his gaze. I did. Halford ignored him. He was a statue. His eyes locked on me. He was no longer looking at a systems architect. He was looking at the person who held the kill switch to his entire company. He had flown to Austin to assess a threat. He had found an executioner with a contract. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. It was the first relaxed movement he had made. He was done assessing. He was negotiating. "Let's discuss Path A," he said, his voice a low rumble. "If Rockland signs, what are your demands, Ms. Ramos?" This was it. I saw my grandfather's note taped to the monitor. "For things that are meant to last. Our terms are not demands," I said. "They are requirements for a secure system." I held up one finger. "First, Orion Flux receives full, unrestricted, root-level data access to your entire network, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no more firewalls, no more guest passes. We are the new standard." 2 fingers. "Second, you terminate your contract with Great Lakes Logistics. The termination must be effective by end of day, today." Halford nodded. That was the easy part. 3 fingers. "Third, you will sign a binding master service agreement with us that includes a mandatory ethics and disclosure clause. This clause legally compels the immediate, formal disclosure of any and all internal conflicts of interest, financial or familial, related to procurement, logistics, and management." The word familial landed in the center of the table and detonated. I had given him the legal weapon he needed. He didn't have to fire Brady for theft. He could fire him for the conflict of interest in signing off on a flawed system that benefited a vendor he was clearly colluding with. It was clean. It was corporate. It was final. Halford stared at me. The silence stretched. I could see the calculations turning behind his eyes. He saw the move. He saw the checkmate. Then, the test, the last twist of the knife, to see if I would bleed. "And what about your family, Ms. Ramos?" he asked, his voice casual, almost friendly. "What about B. Monroe?" He wanted to know if this was business or revenge. He wanted to know if I was a professional or just a daughter. I did not blink. I did not look at my father's boss. I looked at a client. "That is a human resources matter for Rockland Industries," I said. "It is not relevant to this contract." A long, heavy moment passed. A very slow, thin smile spread across Halford's face. It was not a smile of warmth. It was a smile of pure, predatory recognition. He had just lost the game, but he had found a player he respected. He had found someone who could build something that lasts. He pushed his chair back and stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. The authority flowed back into him. "Maya," he said, turning to her. He did not look at me again. He didn't need to. The deal was done. "Have your lawyer," he nodded at Ivory. "Prepare the master service agreement. Send it to my team. I did not fly all the way to Austin to leave here empty-handed." He and his team turned. Halford walked out. Delaney, looking like a dead man walking, followed. The lawyer, who had never spoken, picked up his briefcase and closed the glass door behind him, leaving us in silence. The news of the contract, or at least the shadow of it, arrived in Cleveland before I did. It's a small world, the Midwest manufacturing circuit. It's an even smaller one inside the walls of Rockland Industries. A CEO doesn't just get on a plane to Austin to visit a no-name startup without his entire executive floor knowing, and his executive floor, it seemed, talked. I was in my studio, packing a small weekend bag. When my phone buzzed, it was from my mother, not a picture of the grandkids, not a question about the heat. "Arya, your father's colleague, Jim, his wife just called me. She said Jim heard that Mr. Halford himself flew to Texas to meet with some new software company. Was that you?" The question was so direct, so unlike her, that it stopped me. The grapevine was working. The gossip had already painted a picture, and for the first time, I was in the frame. I texted back. "I had a meeting with Rockland." "Yes." Her reply was instant. "Your father wants to have dinner, this Sunday. Just the family. Please. Just the family." The words that had once been a threat, a container of my exclusion, were now a summons, a desperate plea for information. They were no longer trying to push me out of the frame. They were trying to pull me back in, to figure out what I had done to the picture. "I have a return flight early Monday," I wrote. "I can be there Sunday night, but I can't stay." "That's fine. Just come. 7 o'clock. I flew into Cleveland Hopkins on Sunday afternoon. The sky was a familiar, oppressive lid of flat, gray clouds. The air was cold and wet. It was the air I had been born in, and it felt foreign. I had become accustomed to the sharp, dry heat of Austin, to a sky that was vast and unforgivingly bright. I rented a car, the same anonymous gray sedan I always did, and drove the familiar route to the suburbs. The same trees, the same strip malls, the same sense of a world that was permanently, stubbornly, the same. I passed the Rockland plant on the highway, the massive, windowless box of the Huron depot, my father's engine, my brother's crime scene. I felt nothing, no anger, no sadness. It was just a data point, a system I had audited. I sat in the rental car in my parents' driveway until the digital clock read 7:10, 10 minutes late, just enough to establish that I was on my own schedule. I grabbed the small gift bag from the passenger seat. I walked up the same cracked concrete path. I used my old key. The door opened with the same familiar swell of wood sticking in the frame. The house smelled the same, my mother's roast chicken, damp wool, and the faint, dusty scent of a life lived indoors. But the atmosphere was electric. My father, Martin, was in the dining room, not in his usual chair, but pacing by the window. My mother, Elaine, was hovering by the kitchen door, wiping her hands on an apron, her face tight with anxiety. And Brady was at the table, sitting in his usual spot. His wife, Kara, was beside him. She was staring at her phone, refusing to look up, her knuckles white. Brady was not looking at anything. He was just sitting there, a man waiting for a verdict. He looked smaller. The smug, confident energy had evaporated, leaving behind a damp, nervous residue. "You're late," my father said. But the words had no bite. It was just an automatic response. "The flight was on time," I said. I handed the small bag to my mother. "I brought you something." She opened it, a set of 4, heavy, hand-blown drinking glasses, infused with the pale blue and gold of an Austin sunset. They were beautiful. "Oh, Aria," she breathed, tracing the rim. "They're lovely. Thank you." She was genuinely touched, and for a second, the tension broke. She was just my mother, and I was just her daughter. Then my father turned from the window. "So," he said. He tried to make it sound casual, a joke between men, the way he would talk to Brady. "Jim's wife says you're the one. You're the one who made Halford fly out to Texas." "Huh? Must have been some presentation. What did you show him?" The question was half joking, half accusatory. He was still trying to find his footing. He was trying to frame me as the troublemaker, the one who had made the CEO do something. Kara flinched, her thumb stopping its endless scroll. Brady's head snapped up. His eyes, for the first time, met mine. They were not angry. They were terrified. "It's not," Brady stammered, his voice hoarse. He was looking at me, but he was talking to my father. "Dad, it's not what you think. It's complicated. The logistics, the vendor contract, He was trying to build his defense. He was trying to get his story out first, to muddy the waters, to paint himself as a victim of a complex system. I didn't let him. I set my purse down. I looked at my father. But I spoke to the entire room. My voice was calm. It was the same voice I had used in the boardroom in Austin. "The system was compromised," I said. The room went utterly still. The only sound was the clinking of ice as my mother, on instinct, began filling the new glasses with water. "Rockland had a significant vulnerability," I continued. "It was creating an incentive mechanism for a third-party vendor to exploit inefficiencies for profit. It was a failure of accountability." My father stared at me. This was not the language of his daughter. This was not the language of his house. "What? What are you talking about?" Martin said. "Aria, what did you do?" "I was hired to run a diagnostic," Dad, I said. The diagnostic found a systemic failure. We found a managerial override on a key piece of sorting equipment. We found a coordinated pattern of manufactured delays, and we found a direct correlation to inventory shrinkage. Brady made a noise, a sharp intake of breath. He looked like he was going to be sick. We presented the data, I said. The data showed a critical risk. Rockland had two paths. They could either address the risk, or we would be obligated to report the findings. Martin looked from me to Brady, and back to me. The color was draining from his face. Arya, what? B, Monroe, what did you tell them? I didn't have to tell them anything, I said. The data spoke for itself. The maintenance log spoke for itself. The weight scales and the video spoke for themselves. You spied, Brady choked out, his hands gripping the edge of the table. You invited me, I said, my voice cutting through his panic. You put out a public request. You asked for a solution. I provided one. The fact that the problem was internal is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to the integrity of the system. I paused. It's about choices. Brady, it's about accountability. That's all. The room was silent. My father, Martin Monroe, a man whose entire identity was built on his position at Rockland, on his proximity to power, was staring at his two children. One, his future, the man he had bragged about, was sweating, trapped. The other, the waste of space, was standing calmly by the door, holding the keys to the entire kingdom. He didn't know what to believe. He didn't know who to believe. And then, his phone buzzed. It was on the dining room table, face up, a vibration so loud in the quiet, it made us all jump. He glanced at it. His face, already pale, went ashen. It was an email, an internal, company-wide alert from the office of the CEO. What is it, Marty? Elaine whispered, her hands frozen, holding the water pitcher. Martin fumbled to pick up the phone. His hands were shaking. He read the screen. He read it again. He looked up, his eyes wide, his mouth open. He was not looking at me. He was not looking at Brady. He was looking at a future he no longer understood. Halford, he whispered. It's an email, from Halford, to the entire Midwest Division. What does it say? My mother pressed. Martin read from the screen, his voice thin and reedy. Effective immediately. The contract with Great Lakes Logistics is terminated. For cause, all manifests, all routes, will be subject to a new, mandatory, third-party audit. He swallowed, his eyes scanning the text. He's announcing a new strategic partnership to ensure total operational integrity. My God. A new, comprehensive systems diagnostic. We are pleased to welcome. He stopped. He looked up from the phone, his gaze finding mine across the room. He held the phone out, as if it were on fire. He's pleased to welcome Orion Flux Logistics. This was it, the moment, the shift, the final, irreversible turn of the screw. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, he wasn't looking at his disappointing daughter. He wasn't looking at a waste of space. He was looking at a person who held power. He was looking at someone who had spoken to Halford, who had made Halford act. He was, for the very first time, seeing me as an equal. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and suffocating. Kara, my sister-in-law, had her eyes squeezed shut. She knew what this meant. Brady didn't move. He just sat there, his head bowed. Then, his hands, which were resting on the table, closed around the silver knife and fork at his place setting. He gripped them. He gripped them so hard his knuckles turned white, and the metal tines of the fork began to scrape, a high, thin, unbearable screech, against the porcelain of my mother's wedding china. Scree! Brady! Stop! Elaine cried out, the sound shattering the tension. He dropped the silverware. It clattered loudly on the plate. My mother looked at me. her eyes brimming with tears. The roast was getting cold. The family she had tried to build was falling apart. She didn't understand the contracts, or the overrides, or the data. She just saw the pain. "Arya," she whispered, her voice a plea. "Are you happy?" I looked at her. I thought of the long nights in the server room. I thought of my grandfather's toolbox. I thought of the cold, clean logic of the code. "I'm at peace, Mom," I said. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A gentle vibration. I pulled it out. It was a text message. From June. "You're in their house. Don't forget to drink water. Stay hydrated." A small, genuine smile touched my lips. The only person in this state who truly, unconditionally, saw me. I looked at my mother, who was still holding the water pitcher. Lost. I took one of the new Austin glasses. "Thank you," I said to her. I poured myself a glass of water. Then I took her glass, and I poured one for her, too. I took a long, slow drink. I set the glass down. I picked up my purse. "Arya, wait," my father said, his voice desperate. "The dinner. We need to talk." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "I have to get back. My flight is at 6 in the morning." I looked at my father, at my mother, at my brother's bowed head. "I have to be in Austin. The final signing is at 9. I landed in Austin at 2 in the morning. I showered. I slept for 3 hours. At 7 a.m., I was at the office. The master service agreement, the MSA, was already printed, bound, and sitting in the center of the glass conference room table. It was over an inch thick, a physical representation of the data we had mined. Maya and Ivory Hale were already there. The mood was not celebratory. It was final. It was the quiet, sterile calm of an operation completed. At 8:59, exactly 1 minute early, the elevator chimed. Halford entered, followed only by his lawyer. Delaney, the vice president, was not with them. His absence was a quiet confirmation. He was already a ghost, erased from the system. "Ms. Rourke, Ms. Hale, Ms. Ramos?" Halford nodded to each of us in turn, his gaze stopping on me. He was all business. We sat. The lawyers, theirs and ours, began the ritual, the flipping of pages, the initialing of sections. It was a silent, choreographed dance. But before they reached the final signature page, Halford held up a hand. He looked at me. "Before we finalize, the ethics clause, page 1, Ivory had placed it, as I'd requested, at the very beginning of the document. Disclosure of familial and financial conflicts of interest." It was a clean, brutal piece of legal writing. "This clause," Halford said, his finger tapping the paper, "is robust. It provides the mechanism for internal accountability we were lacking. It is clean." He paused, pulling a single, separate sheet from his folder. "There is, however, an addendum. Section 4B, Community Engagement. It's a standard part of our new strategic partnerships. Rockland dedicates a small percentage of the contract value to a community fund of the vendor's choice, a gesture of partnership." He looked directly at me. His lawyer looked surprised. This was not part of the negotiated deal. This was Halford, closing the loop. This was a personal test. "My team left the designation blank," he said. "Pending your recommendation, Ms. Ramos, is there a local Austin charity you'd like to designate?" He was giving me the pen. He was asking me to write the final line of the story. I thought of the company newsletter. Family values in the workplace. I thought of my father's misplaced pride, my brother's casual entitlement. I thought of the damp, gray misery of Cleveland, and the one person who had told me to build my own foundation. "Yes, Mr. Halford," I said. My voice was steady. "I have a recommendation. I want the fund designated to the June Monroe Scholarship Fund." Halford's eyebrows raised, just slightly. "And that is—" "It's a new fund," I said, the words feeling solid as steel. "We're establishing it today. It's a scholarship for young women from Northeast Ohio who are pursuing degrees in logistics and systems engineering. I had just taken his corporate-mandated family values and given it a purpose. I had rewritten his definition of legacy. I had built my own. Halford stared at me for a long, silent moment. That thin, predatory smile returned. Just for a second. He was a shark. And he respected another shark. He respected the move. He respected the precision. He had offered me a corporate platitude, and I had turned it into a foundation. He nodded, a sharp, decisive motion. He turned to his lawyer. Write it in. He picked up his heavy, expensive pen. He uncapped it. He signed his name with a dark, confident stroke. Maya Rourke picked up her own pen. She looked at me, a flicker of a smile in her eyes. She signed her name. It was done. Orion Flux was no longer a scrappy startup. We were the new standard, and we had just been given the keys to the entire Rust Belt. We shook hands. Halford and his lawyer left. I stood in the glass room, looking down at the city, the adrenaline draining away, leaving a clean, cold calm. Maya put a hand on my shoulder. Well done, architect. As I walked back to my desk, my phone rang. The screen showed the Cleveland area code, the number I had blocked. He was calling from a different phone. I answered. This is Arya. Arya, please. Don't hang up. Brady's voice was a whisper. It was a sound I had never heard in my life. All the volume, the bravado, the smug, sarcastic certainty. It was all gone. He sounded small. I saw the memo, he stammered. Halford, he fired me. Conflict of interest. That was the term he used. He's letting me resign for personal reasons. But, Arya, I'm in Austin. My blood went cold. What? I'm in the lobby of your building. I flew all night. I have to. Can I have 5 minutes? Please, I'm not here to yell. I need to. I looked at Maya. She had heard. She nodded once. Handle it. The lobby of our building was bright, sterile, and empty, all white marble and glass. He was huddled in a corner chair, looking pathetic. His rumpled Rockland polo shirt a stark contrast to the modern furniture. He looked, for the first time, exactly like my father. He stood when he saw me. He looked terrible. They offered me a bonus, he blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. Desperate. The Great Lakes guy, the hauler. He said it was just a consulting fee, a finder's fee. He said everyone does it. He said the system was always failing, always flagging those stupid pallets, and he said if I could standardize the failure, just make it predictable, he could build his routes around it and he'd give me a bonus, a percentage. He was shaking. I swear, Arya, I thought it was just business. I thought it was what Dad always talked about, making the system work for you. I didn't know they were stealing whole pallets. I just made the flaw. I just signed the paper. He was a weak man who had been offered a shortcut, and he had taken it. He wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was just Brady. He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. What do I do, Arya? They're going after Great Lakes. The state is involved. Halford. He's protecting the company. He's going to throw them under the bus. And they're going to talk. They're going to name me. What do I do? He was asking me to save him. The waste of space. The kid playing on a computer. He was asking me to fix his life. I looked at him. I felt no anger. I felt no pity. I just felt the cold, clean logic of a system. He had a problem. He needed a solution. I reached into my bag. I pulled out my wallet. I took out a business card. I had gotten it from Ivory Hale that morning, just in case. I held it out to him. This is Ms. Eris Thorne, I said. My voice was flat. She's the best labor and employment lawyer in Cleveland. She specializes in corporate severance and witness protection. He stared at the card as if it were a snake. You're right, I said. They are going to name you. Halford gave you a gift by letting you resign. It separates you from the company, but it doesn't protect you from the state. You are a material witness. Brady, you need to be the first one to talk. You need to offer your testimony in exchange for immunity. I pushed the card into his limp hand. I am not your sister right now. I am a systems architect, and this is the system. You know what you did. You need to go home. You need to call this number, and you need to clean up your own mess. He closed his hand around the card, crushing it. He just nodded, unable to speak. Go home, Brady, I said. I turned and walked back to the elevator, the doors sliding shut on his reflection. My phone rang again an hour later. It was my father. His voice was hollow, defeated. He's fired. He resigned, I corrected, gently. They're all talking about it. The memo, your company, the end of Great Lakes. Jim, my colleague, he said Brady was involved, that he was stealing. The data showed a significant conflict of interest, I said, sticking to the script. A conflict, he started. Then his voice broke, a dry, ragged sob. I didn't know that, but I knew that Great Lakes' contract it smelled bad. The VP who signed it. He's Brady's godfather. I saw the numbers, the delays. I thought about saying something. To Halford, I thought, this isn't right, he was confessing, to me. But I didn't, he whispered. I kept my head down. Brady was the future. He was my son. I thought, it's just business. I didn't want to make waves. I was afraid. He was quiet. I heard him take a shaky breath. I don't understand half of what you did. Arya, this obsidian thing, this data, but I know one thing. You did the thing I was too afraid to do. You told the truth. The validation. After all these years, it landed, and it felt light. It wasn't the heavy, triumphant moment I had imagined. It was just sad. Dad, I said, and the word felt strange on my tongue. I don't need an apology. I don't care about the past. I just need you to be kinder. Moving forward. That's all. Yeah, he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. Okay, your mother? She loves the glasses. I'm glad, I said. I have to go, Dad. Yeah, okay. He hung up. That night, I didn't go home to my studio. I went to a small, local restaurant I had booked. In the back, there was a private room. In the center was a long, dark, wooden table. It was set for 10. There was no head of the table. There were just 10 equal chairs, arranged in a circle. Leo was there. Maya was there. The other 4 engineers from the Pulse team were there. My neighbor from my apartment building. A kind woman who had helped me jump my car battery was there. In one chair. A laptop was propped up. On the screen, June Monroe was sipping a cup of tea, grinning. Her image beamed in from Cincinnati. I had bought a new radio, a better one. It was on the sideboard, playing the same low, crackling jazz. I sat down. Leo poured wine. Maya raised her glass. To the architect, she said. They all raised their glasses. I looked at them. My team, my colleagues, my friends, my table. I raised my own glass. To the ones who were told they were just taking up space, I said, my voice clear and strong. We don't take up space. We make the space. We drank. The food came. The laughter was real. Later that night, I was back in my studio. The window was open, the hot, dry Texas air, filled with the sound of distant music, felt like home. My laptop was open on my desk. A new email alert popped up. It was not from my family. It was not from Maya. It was an automated alert. From Obsidian. Subject unauthorized access attempt. Rockland, Huron. Body Obsidian detected and blocked an unauthorized attempt to modify archival maintenance logs for Sorter 12 Alpha. User Delaney VP. Action blocked. Logged. Report automatically forwarded to Rockland CEO Halford and Orion Flux Compliance. Delaney, the last rat, trying to erase the evidence from a terminal in Ohio, trying to scrub the data, but the system had held. The lock I built had worked. It had seen him. It had blocked him. And it had reported him, all without me lifting a finger. I looked at the email, then I looked out the window, at the vast, bright, endless Texas sky. I smiled. This was my table. This was my network. And these were my rules. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. So please drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear it.